I am Kristin Walker-Burt with TNTP, and welcome to this session where we're going to talk about how the research and practice stars aligned to get us to a place where we could tell the bright spot stories around where are the schools and what are they doing that are able to change the trajectories for young people. So at a time when we could talk about all of the things that are wrong and are troubling educators, students, schools, and systems, TNTP and NewSchools published research that talked about what was right. And I think that we were intentional about telling stories about what's going right, because if we don't do our part to scale the improvement of student outcomes and accelerating learning now, we'll have millions of students who will never catch up. So let's talk about what's going right. Today, I have a set of folks here, some powerhouse leaders who both represent the hard work of accelerating learning, but also in doing and so that they have sustainable progress. And so before I ask our leaders to introduce themselves, I want to center us on the fact that these schools are real schools. All right, you're going to hear remarkable outcomes. You'll have a chance, if you haven't already, to download the reports, but you're going to see their stories, which in some ways feel very unattainable because they're so inspiring. But what I want to say is these are real leaders in real contexts, in real communities, and in serving real children in a way that the work that they are doing is far more accessible than folks think. And we want to bring to you, right, that sort of confluence of research and practice so that they can demonstrate and talk through the work and strategies that they do every day and that all of us could take up the mantle and do as well. And so I'm going to ask, they're not nervous, are they? I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And in doing so, tell us one of the outcomes that you are most proud of your school or district to date. And I'll start at the end with Renee.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name's Renee Nicothodes. I work as the Chief Academic Officer in JeffCo Public Schools in Denver, Colorado. We are the second largest school district in Colorado with about 150 schools, 72,000 students. And we have been working towards improving our student outcomes in math. And so one of the outcomes I'm really proud of is within 1 year since last year, through our work, we have gone from having 11 of our schools demonstrating at the 65th percentile, median growth percentile for student growth or higher, so that gap closing growth. We had 11 schools the year before, and this past year we had 55 schools in math demonstrating at the 65th percentile or above for growth. And so I'm pretty excited about that kind of growth with so many of our schools, and I fully anticipate that may double this year.
Good morning. My name is Victoria Barajas. I'm the principal at Van Buskirk Elementary School. It's in Tucson, Arizona. I'd like to say, well, kind of the fast answer is student growth, but I'll be more specific to one of my programs. We have 3 programs in my school. One is the Gen Ed, the English program, English only program, and then we have a dual language Spanish immersion program. And that is very much like what a college student would experience when they sign up for a course to learn in Mexico, learn Spanish for however many weeks, to be immersed in Spanish. So we have a dual language Spanish immersion program, and then of course we have a program for our English language learners. And I would say one of the great successes in the building is that our Spanish dual language immersion students rank up there sometimes higher than their English only counterparts. So with their data, you'll see often in the dual language data that bilingual kids tend to outperform their English only peers, and I would say you'd see that research alive and well at Van Buskirk, because by the time they're in 5th grade, they are 50-50 English, Spanish. They can read, write, speak, understand what is spoken in 2 languages, and they can perform on those English-only assessments. So I'd say that's one of our accomplishments.
Good morning. Yes? Can you hear me? Should I sing? No. I could. So I'm Dr. Alexa Sorden, and I am the founding principal of what was Concourse Village and now LEAD, which is Leaders of Excellence, Advocacy, and Discovery. And we're located in the South Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in the nation. And I say that because what I'm most proud of is that on last year's state assessments, our students scored 100% proficient on the ELA. All students, and 98% proficient on the math exam, and 82% proficient on the first time ever administered 5th grade science assessment. And if you see the science assessment, 82 is like, wow. So that's what I'm most proud of.
So let's give them another round of applause. And I think you now see why we have them representing their work and their outcomes here today. And so as I mentioned earlier, this is really a session where we want to have a conversation with you all who embody the takeaways. And frankly, it's really uncanny, the similarities between the takeaways for the opportunity makers that TNTP released and Building Better Schools and New Schools release. But it's clear, right? It's clear. If we're changing academic trajectories for young people, we have to do so in ways that amplify their student experience. And by doing that, we're attending to the belonging, not just the belonging of students, but also educators. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Like, how are we creating the conditions and the structures that reinforce that you belong here and you are seen and valued in this space as a young person and as an educator in the building? We're also going to talk about what it means to have and set the bar for consistently good teaching at grade level, right? In all caps. That was me going to all caps. At grade level. And everybody, you don't get the outcomes that these leaders just named without doing that. Additionally, we want to talk about what it means to bring instructional coherence to the forefront, right? Incoherence is easy, but instructional coherence is the thing that is going to tie all of our work together, and these leaders are doing that. And finally, they do so with sustained practices. And so we're bringing, don't worry, I brought those questions today to ask them, right? They're doing it. And so as you're listening to their responses, I'm inviting you both to use the QR code to bring your questions, right? We want to bring, just as these reports brought really clear findings, we also want to have a conversation about actionable solutions and strategies so that you don't walk away from here thinking, great, I know what to do, but nobody said how, and so we want to have that conversation as well. So use the QR code. We will bring those questions to this group during the Q&A, all right? All right, and so we already sort of got a spotlight on these amazing outcomes that are represented here on the stage with me, and it's truly an honor to be able to bring to you all this conversation. Renee, I'm going to start with you. Can you? As a system leader, one of the themes that emerged from both papers was this notion of bringing a coherent learning experience for young people. So we're talking about instructional coherence. Can you talk to me and our guests here really around how you've aligned district and school communities around a coherent instructional vision and supported them to make sure it's implemented with fidelity?
So as a district leader, I had to think really hard about how do we kind of strike that just right balance between school-based autonomy and system coherence. We had a lot of variability within our system when we started. We actually were looking at our math outcomes, our student outcomes in math, and they weren't where they needed to be. And so we did an audit of just let's find out what's going on in the field, and found out that we had 21 different resources, K-12, being used for math, core math instruction. And so that was one thing we said, you know what, we can be more consistent than that, and there's a lot of benefits to being more coherent and consistent with the resources that we used. So we are right now using one resource, K-12, illustrative math. And then once we identified that we wanted to invest in core instruction through a high-quality instructional resource, we named a few key priorities for students, namely 5th and 8th grade math. Those are really important benchmarks for students. And across our system were where a lot of our gaps were. And so it was important that we identified kind of that clear need that everyone could embrace and work towards as a system. And then we started to prioritize professional learning to build capacity for our instructional leaders, both our coaches, our principals, our APs, to support implementation. And we also had to put in systems and structures for ongoing continuous improvement and feedback along the way. So within our system at every level, we have a structure or a feedback mechanism for leaders. It's leadership learning walks, so twice a month, all of like within one articulation area. We have 18 in our district that are, a couple of elementary, it's a matriculation pattern, a middle school, and then a high school. And so each one of the articulation areas, all the principals come together and we walk classrooms looking for bright spots of things we've been learning about during professional learning. And then they would do the same thing within their schools. Teachers were engaged in peer observations. So we had these things kind of cascading and throughout our system so we could monitor, support implementation over time. So I think identifying a clear need, really focusing in on some key priorities that everyone could embrace, supporting people with the resources and professional learning to do it, and monitoring, this ongoing monitoring through these different feedback structures, as well as leadership being willing to lean in, listen, and learn. We talk a lot about understanding where our schools are at and what they need, and being in the schools with them side by side, talking about what's working, and then making adjustments to our plan along the way. And then I think one final thing I would share around this idea around coherence is we created a tool that's been really effective and helping communicate system-wide coherence around our goals. And that's been what we call the arc of learning. And basically it's a graphic. I love graphics. When you're working on something at scale, they are really helpful in communicating some complex things in really simple ways. And so we have this arc of learning, and it's truly a graphic with an arc. And it has a timeline for the months of the school year. And each month we have kind of a 3-hour executive leadership meeting where our principals, our coaches, and our APs come together and engage in professional learning with a topic for that month along our arc. And then we have our leadership learning walks built in there. So it's really kind of a map or a timeline of what are we doing this year? Where are we headed? School leaders were saying things at the beginning like, could the district tell us what we're going to be working on before August next year? So a tool like that has really helped us come together around a collective vision. And it's not the only thing schools are working on, but these are like 3 things we're all going to get really good at together. And the opportunities for increased collaboration have been beautiful to see between our schools. Teachers that know each other at different schools are able to talk about the same things because we're working on the same things, right? Or have a new idea for this. So it's really lifted up collaboration within our system in a way that we didn't quite anticipate at the time, but it's really been great. One of our instructional coaches recently said, this is the most consistent and coherent we've been in 15 years in this district. Thank you. So that means a lot to me. And this year, as we're designing our arc for next year, I'm asking people, if you could design the arc of learning for next year, what would be on it? And we're continuing to hear, stay the course, don't add anything new. Let's go deeper with what we've started and get better together. So that's what I would share.
And you said something really key about, and tell us what you want to do and what are the things that we can stop doing. And I think one of the things I want to call out about your response is, yes, being responsive to the needs and the things that we need to put in place to make sure there is a coherent experience. But what are the things that we can stop doing and take away? We're going to come back to that, right? Because I want to get us to when we're talking about belonging, but you mentioned also in a conversation, Renee, how you sort of brought to the table, these are the requirements from the district this year. This is a decrease from last year, right? So everybody in the school building and adjacent is happy to hear a decrease, and that brings about the coherence. I appreciate that. Alexa. Hey, Alexa.
The weather's partly cloudy.
Alexa, this is a question for you. One of the conversations that always comes up when we think about changing trajectories for young people and really enhancing their experiences gets around belonging, right? And how nurturing relationships are cultivated in the school building. We also know that you cannot do that without having and building that same relationship or experience for the educators in the building. How have you been able to do that in a way that advances student outcomes?
So I totally agree. What we want our students to receive as leaders, we have to make sure our teachers receive that as well. So we happen to be a pros school, which in New York City, because teachers are part of the UFT union, they can sign up to be pros to kind of move away a bit from the contract, and the teachers create their own contract in a way. So one of the things that they voted for was, we don't want to meet every Monday. It feels very redundant, it feels compliant, and it feels disjointed. So we opted for cycles of professional learning. So our teachers engage in 3 cycles of professional development throughout the school year, and the 3 cycles will go on for 2 weeks after school, for 2.5 hours after school for 3 consecutive days. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The teachers voted on what days should be half days, and we aligned it with long weekends. So there was a lot of things we took into account. Spring break. So I was thinking about, they're burned out, they're tired. How does it make sense to create a schedule where they feel that they had input and that we're taking into consideration when we're starting to kind of tap out as a profession at that time of year? So we took those things into account, and then professional development is differentiated. So folks are not in the same room at the same time getting recycle of last year's PD or anything like that. You're getting the things that you need. The other thing that educators wanted was to be departmentalized. So we are departmentalized in grades K through 6. So now that helped cut down the planning by 50%. So elementary school teachers tend to have to plan for every subject, but in this case, it's a humanities team and a math and science department. So now they've become experts in their content area. So that's really helped them with balancing their personal time, feeling better about their profession, and then now they've become better teachers, they're happier. And I say better teachers because they're more equipped, more prepared, and more knowledgeable. And they have more time. So when I say that, that's what I mean. And so they're able to pour into their kids and into the students in different ways. And I'm also very playful. I think I'm extremely funny. So that helps a lot. So at PD, we do things that'll, liven us up. We play, we talk, we engage in different icebreakers. And so it's just different ways to engage. And I could also sense when they've had enough. And I would stop a session and say, guess what? I'm going to give you the gift of time. It looks like you're no longer interested. So I'll send this as an email, and I'll just need you to just reply and tell me what your next thoughts are. So I can be also very receptive to the mood in the room. So that helps to create the sense of you see me, I am seen. I'm also physically tired, and I guess you are too. So they see grace, they see empathy, and they feel seen. So then they in turn give that back to children.
That's right. Thank you for that. We absolutely know that if educators can give that to children, they absolutely give it back. And that I love that you use grace. I love that you use the words value and being seen. We know from our work that when children are seen, valued, and feel like they belong, it activates their learning. It's a prerequisite, right? And that comes in the way, I'm gonna give myself a little segue here, to what it means to tie that to academics, right? For a lot of times we've spoken about for a long time we've talked about belonging as relational, right? And that's the way we see it. But it can also be very structural, right? And in fact, lots of the findings that overlap in these reports point to what are the structures that reinforce these nurturing relationships, so we don't leave to chance that you're not the funny teacher, but you still need a relationship, right? And so part of that comes through having consistently good teaching, right? Students who have access to grade level content feel seen. They feel seen. They say, you think I can do this, so I'm going to do it, right? So it doesn't have to just be about our high fives and hugs or jokes, but it can be, I know that you see me and value me through the work that you put in front of me, even if it's challenging. And so I'm going to bring us to Victoria. You are featured in the Opportunity Makers as an exemplar for the consistency focus area. And that focus area hinges specifically on, where did I go? Hinges specifically on making sure students have grade level content. And when they do, their work, you see them rise to the occasion. And so your case study in that report focuses a lot on your use of the PLC, both as a structure for implementation of high expectations for student learning, but also your approach to monitoring, right, the level of instruction and support your educators and students need day in and day out. Tell us what that day in and day out is.
So we have our PLCs, our professional learning communities, our grade level teams. Sometimes we do it vertically within our department, as I mentioned, our departments. As I mentioned, we have a dual language Spanish immersion, and then we've got our general ed kids, and we've got our structured English instruction that's woven in. And so what we do is our release time, we have a release time for planning that has been added for every week. Now, we're like many schools, we don't have extra funding to hire extra people. So what we've done is we've got a library assistant who is part-time, and then we have our counselor who is on campus. And we've got a schedule so that kids can attend an hour of instruction, half an hour library, half an hour with the counselor, while our teams will meet in the room that's adjacent with a view of the kids, because our library assistants are not certified. So we have to take care of that. And then we plan. And that release time is within the workday. So our district provides a 1 hour PD time once a week, but this one here is the one that we really have a handle on, and we control the agenda. Okay, but the agenda is very much to support teachers and kids, and our grade level teams will get together. We have a template for planning. We have two major pieces that we're addressing. One is the grade level standard, the curriculum that we're using. And then the second one is the assessment that's being used at the end of each week. So, it's called the formative, or we call it a quiz. It's a 5-item formative for math, and we use a curriculum, Benchmark Advance, for ELA. So what we do is we have the same template we've used year after year, and it's a breakdown of one standard and what the teacher is going to follow, the progression through the week. But the teacher has to see the assessment, because a curriculum, can be huge. And the teacher could be emphasizing something that's not assessed at the end of the week. So it's that backwards planning. They look at the assessment, they make sure they're looking at the standard, the grade level standard in math or reading, and they break it down to make sure that they're engaging students in that very specific learning throughout the week. To take away kind of the thread of, oh my goodness, I don't know if I'm doing well, is really focusing on student growth and looking at those outcomes and not at the individual teacher. The teams plan together. The teacher coach helps. I love instruction, so I'm in there helping as well with examples and some guidance, some clarification. But they're planning the standard, the key vocabulary, the key questions they're going to ask, everything that they're rolling out for the week. And then the quiz is at the end of the week. And we look at the student work to make sure that we know how our kids are doing. And, often we're asked, well, how do you motivate teachers to do that? And I have to say, you know, teachers really are committed. They're dedicated to learning, and they're invested in kids, the majority, okay? And they're going to want to see great results. That's why they're there. And so when they start to see that the kids are learning and gaining this, you know, this learning, they slowly start to change their teaching over time to engage the kids better, to ask better questions, to use different strategies for differentiation. All that we're helping them with along the way, but that template is what is the same year after year, and it's week after week. And so when they use it one year, they can always make it better the next year. But that stays the same, and that's really what helps our teachers focus on grade level expectations. We're not focusing on last year, we're focusing on what is front and center this year and expecting the kids to master that. And then, of course, we do interventions when they're struggling or need more information. But that template has been a key tool for us. And, of course, knowing the assessment is the other piece. You can't drive this way and expect to get there. And so we have to have that clear path. We have to know what that assessment looks like. And oftentimes there's a lot of coaching that goes on along the way. Some of our teachers are new, some of them are more experienced. So when they have results that don't look so good at the end of the week, and you ask that question of, well, let's take a look at their work. Let's take a look at how they answered the questions. Which was the question that your class didn't get right? You know, what did they struggle with? Oh, it looks like number 4. Okay, so why do you think they didn't do well on number 4? Because I didn't cover it. Right. Oh, okay. You know, that whole thing of, I need to make sure I know what the assessment is and how the question is formatted, because as you know, some questions are low level, some questions are higher level thinking. If they're teaching low level, how are the kids going to get up to that higher level thinking? So really supporting them, asking them those reflection questions, and working together as a team. The team has to work together. So as administrators, as the principals, sometimes we have to move people to a different grade level to get along better with their team. We always want leaders within the team to kind of watch the time, watch the agenda that I create. It's always the same. Reading planning, math planning, data. You know, where do you want to start today? We want 20 minutes on data or 30 minutes on data, and then we want to do math. So they've got some say, but it's all the same. And week after week, you know, my coach and I, my instructional coach, will talk about it, and she'll say, are we keeping the same agenda? Yes. Always check in with your teachers. How are you doing? Check their energy. Do they need a little more time on something? Do we need to back up a little and just give them some extra time on something that's on the hot burner for them? You have to pay attention to how they're feeling, and you've got to keep your hand on that pulse, because sometimes you have to let go, okay, once in a while. But for the most part, we're there. We've got a consistent agenda. We've got a consistent tool. We help them understand how to use the tool. And what you'll see, I've got some principal friends that are trying the tool out, and you can see the difference in the instruction in the classroom, because you visit that room. I visited last year. I come in this year. And I'm like, wow, that teacher really knows that math standard. And she's like, we're using the template. It's really that time to break down and get to know the standard. And that's how we get to that grade level. But how do you know they're good teachers and that they're getting, you know, the kids are participating and engaged? Walkthroughs, feedback, questioning. I love instruction, so does my teacher trainer. So if it's a leader, if it's an administrator who doesn't like, that's not their thing, then they need to hire somebody who loves it. You've got to eat, sleep, breathe it. You've got to love instruction. If you're the leader, then if you're not, get a leader who does, and they'll be in there and they'll be doing everything you want them to do. And then get the grade levels to find your leaders within every grade, because you've got to support them in their growth as individual leaders so that they do some of the harder work for you. And it's not really for you. It's all for the kids, right? It's all for the kids.
It's all for the kids. And as you can see, I actually am glad, Victoria, you went into the details, because a lot of us have seen a lot of PLCs done a lot of different ways. And then a lot of times you've seen where district mandates, district training, updates, announcements sort of consume those agendas. And what we're leaving behind are the very things, the student data. How are they answering the questions? What do they need to do today or that we can shift tomorrow? that doesn't happen in classrooms everywhere. And so you could see why Van Buskirk is highlighted here. That's a day in and day out practice that we saw with all of our eyes, right? Eyes, readers, all the things we had. And she's right, it happened every day, each day, and then the next day it was put into action. And that's the sort of consistency we're talking about, because good teaching doesn't have to wait for the next district mandate, right? Good teaching doesn't have to wait for the next PD day to occur. So I hope, I'm excited. Look, I got all energized about the consistent instruction there, because it does start with grade level content. Just a quick reminder, if you have questions, I could find it again. Let's go ahead and use this QR code to ask them. We're coming upon our Q&A part, and I have one last question, just really about sustaining the practices that I want each of you to answer. You all are here not because you had 1 year of success, right? You all aren't either on this panel or featured in the reports because you did a thing one time. You're here because we've seen sustained success, right? Over time, we've seen historical and current demonstrations and reflections of the work that you're doing to increase academic mobility. And so as you think about where you are in your schools and school communities are now, where and what are you doing to make sure things continue, right, to improve for the young people in your care, but that you are also very much attending to the evolving needs of the children you serve? And I'll start with you, Renee, but ask each of you to answer.
I think one of the keys to sustainability for us is around this evolving vision that we define it, we refine it based on feedback, seek input, and we're focused on things that they're not going anywhere. We're focused on effective PLCs with a clear protocol, effective planning for instruction through unit and lesson internalization, and this active monitoring or academic monitoring. So just kind of 3 key things. And so we're capturing video clips of these practices in action, either in a PLC or in a classroom with students. We're building out an instructional playbook that describes the practice, has a clip that you can go to see it in action as a teacher. We're building it into our new teacher induction, professional learning to onboard for teachers as well as for leaders. And so we're looking across our system at different ways we can continue to keep this alive and just go deeper on some just really impactful practices. So I think, yeah, that evolving vision around some things that we've put our stake in the ground around that aren't going anywhere, and then making them visible on an ongoing basis through these different tools.
So for us, the framework that we use for our weekly planning that I mentioned has one focus standard. Let's say it's math. And then the breakdown, the progression of what's going to be taught, the lesson target daily, success criteria, key vocabulary, key questions. That doesn't change. It doesn't change. It's the same, well, you have one standard per week. What might change is the curriculum. Your district might purchase a brand new curriculum, and that has happened over time. But my teachers know their standard so well that they're still locked into the standard. And like this last adoption, they're like, Ms. Barajas, you're gonna love the new curriculum. And I said, really, why? Because it's focused, it's sequential, it's aligned. I can see the progression. I can find there's resources in this curriculum where I can see the sub-objectives. So they know their standards, where now they're taking more ownership of whatever their resources. You know, I had a new coach who came in and she's like, I've never seen any of this done in a school in my life. And then she said, Miss So-and-so wants to try to use that resource. And I said, only if that resource gets better result than this resource. I said, she needs to show that she can use this resource before she pulls something out that's over there. I said, because this resource is proven to be effective, and there's so much to it that I can tell she's not even dipping into it. It's almost like I like that teachers pay teacher item, and I like it too. But first, teachers will get better at their craft over time when they learn the standard and they become much more confident in making that come alive and making it more designed to their style. But they shouldn't be creating their own standards. And they certainly don't create their own well, they can create assessments from an assessment bank. We have an assessment bank that we have, but they're not creating their teacher-made quiz. Those days are long gone. When I started teaching back in '94, that's what we used to have to do, create our own quizzes out of nowhere. But now we've got so many resources. So what do? We stick to our very simple template that is deep. Teachers learn what it is that students are supposed to learn, and then they figure out the how they're going to learn it, and then they look at the assessment for the proof that the kids have learned. It's that DUFOUR model, D-U-F-O-U-R, right, of PLCs, that you look at where the kids are at after the quiz, who needs an intervention and who gets an enrichment. But the template is the guide. And no matter what else happens around us, the template and the standard is still the guide. So that's kind of what helps our teachers. Okay.
I think we all need the template. You got to share the template. So for us, we're growing a school. So we started as a 3K to 5, and this year was sixth grade, and we're adding until we get to 8th grade. A big shift that we've made in our practice is that we've included our students in the planning. They're older now, they've been with us, and now we need their feedback. And we're very flexible in places where we can be, such as science and social studies. There's a lot of flexibility there. So the topics that they want to learn, they'll tell us what they want to learn, and we'll make sure it all makes sense and is aligned. But the biggest shift for us has been learning plans, and that's how we've been able to create coherence, consistency, and a sense of belonging. So we do design learning plans for students in K through 6. It's 3 types of learning plan: blue, green, and orange. Orange is approaching, green on, blue is above. And we get feedback from the students. And that learning plan represents a week-long agenda. Students are able to go through that plan at their own pace. If they wanted to finish it sooner, they can, and then they engage in choice. So that's one way that we're able to continue to be a trajectory school. When they write the next report, we will be included in it. So that'll be something that'll be featured, learning plans.
All right, she is manifesting something nobody asked about yet, but that's right. Change trajectories. We are changing academic trajectories. All right, let's see. So we have a few questions. That's all right. All right, so, yes, let's get to a question around, have your efforts also led to other improvements across the school and district? So let's talk about talent metrics, perhaps teacher retention, student enrollment even. Where have you seen shifts and improvements in those areas? Renee, I'll go to you maybe for a system view there around those improvement in other areas beyond academic.
Could you name those things again?
I could. How have your efforts also led to improvements in other areas like teacher retention, enrollment, things outside of the sort of areas we've named, or other school culture outcomes that you can contribute or attribute to changes in those strategies?
I think teacher retention is one I could talk a little bit about. We actually were losing teachers at one time because when they came to JeffCo, they were told that we didn't have resources and that they had to create their own. And so we actually lost new teachers in our system as a result of that. So it's certainly been really helpful for our newest teachers, and I know that they are very glad to have resources that they don't have to create from scratch their first year of teaching. As far as enrollment, I'm not sure that we've seen any changes around enrollment yet as a result of the academic work. We're all experiencing declining enrollment and challenging budgets, I think, like every other district right now. But I do think it is impacting our teacher retention and clarity about their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Alexa, I love that you departmentalized K-6. Can you share more about that? What does the teacher planning and collaboration time look like in your schedule?
So we made that decision based on teacher strengths. So teachers expressed what strengths they had, and it helped us to actually deepen our coherence and consistency because there's one person at that grade teaching math. So the way that it's split is that we have 2 classes per grade. We're still a small school. We've had challenges with enrollment because we're surrounded by charters. And they have longer school hours. And so with that, we have two classes on each grade. So one teaches the humanities, the other person's the math and science. So that's just how the split happened. They expressed what they were strongest in and what they had an interest in. So that made it pretty simple. And then in terms of collaboration, they have the grade level teachers have the same prep every day. So they always meet every day to talk about the children in their grade. So they're always together. And then for our professional development cycles, we break up into department teams. And that's when we're talking about alignment and tracking a standard from K to 6, looking at trends, patterns. The other things that we do is we engage in professional growth partners. So our teachers will be assigned to a teacher on a different grade, different content, but that's a professional growth partner that they're with for about 8 to 10 weeks, and they go in once a week for 15 minutes to observe that teacher. They observe one another because it's their partner, and they give each other feedback. And what they're looking at is particular instructional moves or how they're running their classroom. It could be based on instruction or it could be classroom management. Whatever the purpose for that partnership is, they'll know in advance. So that's one way that they work together and plan.
Sure.
Don't you always think about, oh, I wish I had said this. I had one thing I just remembered that I did want to share around different impacts outside of academics, and it's to this idea of belonging and academic belonging specifically. One of our middle schools, it's really engaging in the active monitoring strategy that we've introduced and trying to operationalize across our system. They're doing really good work around it and gotten to pretty high levels of consistency in their building. And what they're seeing are dramatic reductions in behavior challenges and instances in their school as a result. Because teachers are constantly, they're very clearly planned, similar to your point, before they go in the classroom for teaching, and they're very present when students are working, and during that independent practice time, they're consistently roving the classroom, giving academic feedback to students to help them move towards that lesson level mastery. So students, we have a district-wide panorama survey, it's really around student engagement. They're reporting right now, their student perception is the academic expectations are more rigorous now, pretty much system-wide, and they feel seen, and they feel valued, and they feel supported by their teachers as a result of this. And just recently spoke with one of our middle school principals who said, it's unbelievable. Our counselors are now saying we don't have to talk about behavior interventions anymore.
Yeah. I think you're raising a point, and one of the biggest takeaways and the opportunity makers is, like, you can take a step or make a change in one focus area and it begets a change in the other, right? We sort of think about these as overlapping because students don't experience belonging, coherence, consistency at different times. They experience them all at the same time every day that they walk in the building. And so any practice, any catalyzing practice leaders and educators can put into place in one of those areas is going to lead to change in another. You can hear in their responses, right, if we're asking a question about belonging, Renee just raised, right? Like, it has something to do with the academics. It has something to do with the consistently good teaching that is happening. And so it's hard, though we wanted to put them in 3 different buckets and lanes, it's hard to talk about them as 3 discrete experiences when in fact they're not. They're very much overlap. And you can start somewhere, right? Start with your strength. Is one of the recommendations we give. There was a question around what folks are doing around leveraging parent-student relationships. And the thing I want to name there is, especially in the schools featured and the conversations you've heard here, those 3 areas also bring those caregivers and parents along in a way where parents are very clear what their students and young people and children are learning. They're very clear about the interventions and enrichments that they're experiencing. I can remember trying to get parents to consent for students to participate in the opportunity makers, and in one site, they said, oh no, my child is behind in that class, so if this is going to be a problem, it's a no for us. And we were like, no, it won't be a problem, but also, yes, thank you, you're right? Like, they are very clear about what matters and what their child and those educators are focused on. And so again, I'm not good at graphics, but if I had one, that sort of linked to the caregiver and the parent support, but also just like involvement and their articulation of what is happening and what is needed is paramount. So I actually want to, I'm gonna pass that to you so I don't drop it. I want to make sure, one, we give our panelists another round of applause for the amazing work that they're doing. I also have on the screen, you are able to, did I give you everything? I'm sorry, Alexa. You're able to both use the QR codes to download the copies of both reports, so the Opportunity Makers and Building Better Schools. Both reports come with toolkits and resources. You heard template this, you heard resource that today. Take advantage of those, right? Take advantage of the resources, the findings, the strategies that are so clearly spelled out in both reports. And spend time with your leadership teams, with your colleagues, with your partners, with your staff and team members, wherever you sit in this space, and think about what it means for you to take a step toward changing academic trajectories, right? Like, these leaders carry a lot of the load, but they don't have to do it alone. And at TNTP, at NewSchools, we're thinking about what are the call to actions for folks who are adjacent to these buildings, but supporting them in their work. And if you're an ed entrepreneur, like, what are the tools and resources you can bring to this space to help them do their work? If you're a systems leader or policy maker, like, what barriers can you move out of their way? We all have something we could start and do today. Coming out of the plenary session this morning and the panel as well, I was reminded of my favorite book, Dr. King's Why We Can't Wait. And he says, for years, like, the word wait has almost always meant never, right? And in this moment, sort of bringing these experiences even today together, it just reminds me that all young people in this country deserve to thrive, right? And they are the reasons why we can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.